Good morning,
Good morning.
sir.
Good morning. Good morning, General Sir. How are you?
How are you? Very fine, sir. After a long time seeing you, sir.
I know.
I hope you are keeping well, sir.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine and busy. So
Okay. That's good, sir.
it
We're
took a
looking
little while
forward to talk today.
get linked today, but now it's working with the help of your colleagues.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Good morning, Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi ji.
जी जी
नमस्ते।
आप कैसे हैं? आपके दर्शन हुए?
नहीं, बहुत अच्छा लगा आपसे मिलके।
नमस्कार जोशी जी।
नमस्कार साहब।
नमस्कार, बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है आपको देखकर।
थैंक यू वेरी मच। आपको बस मैं याद करता रहता हूँ अक्सर।
हाँ, हम भी।
जी अरे यार
अनिल जी।
हाँ जी
जोशी जी, गुड मॉर्निंग।
गुड मॉर्निंग।
बस बढ़िया, अच्छे। आप सुनाइए।
Shall we start?
सूर्य प्रकाश जी।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
गुड मॉर्निंग सर। थैंक यू। आपने ज्वाइन।
I'll just request Anil Kathak to start with. Anil ji, Anil Kathak.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Please
sir.
start the inaugural program.
Okay, sir. A very good morning to all the distinguished dignitaries, panelists, and the participants. I am Anil Kathak, young professional, Center for Hill Area Development, Geometeorological Risk Management Division, National Institute of Disaster Management, and I am the moderator of today's webinar. On behalf of National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, and Himachal Pradesh State Disaster Management Authority, I welcome you all to today's webinar on sustainable and safe hill area development with focus on earthquakes, landslides, and floods. There will be two sessions, inaugural and technical one. For inaugural session, we have dignitaries, namely Shri Suresh Bhardwaj, Honorable Minister for Urban Development, Town and Country Planning, Housing, Government of Himachal Pradesh, Shri Ajit Singh, IAS, former Cabinet Secretary, Government of India, Major General Manoj Kumar, BSM, Executive Director, NIDM, and Professor Surya Prakash at GMR Division, NIDM. The distinguished experts who will be sharing their wisdom with us during technical session are Sri P.P. Srivastav, IAS, Member Advisory Board, NDMA, Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi, Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan awardee and founder of Himalayan Environmental Studies and Conservation Organization, Sri D.C. Rana, Deputy Special Secretary, Revenue and Disaster Management, Government of Himachal Pradesh, and Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division, NIDM. The aim of today's webinar is on strategies to strengthen the resilience of our hilly areas against the recurring disaster. As per estimation, mountains cover 24% area of world's total land surface, and about 12 to 14% population of world lives in and around hilly areas. Earthquakes, landslides, and floods are among the major disasters that are frequent in hilly states and cause colossal damage to lives, livelihood, to our built environment as well as our natural one. Further, dramatically, changes in climatic conditions are anticipated to intensify the frequency and magnitude of these disasters. To regain status quo of disaster-affected area have not always been a straightforward task. So we need to respect laws of nature. We have always exploited our mountains to fulfill our insatiable hunger for growth, for development, without considering the need of our is to harmonize our development strategies with the unique attributes of hilly areas with our dynamic mountains. The very first agenda of PM's 10-point agenda on DRR also highlighted the need to mainstream DRR in development activities to ensure the safety of our development. We are hopeful that the webinar will be fruitful in bringing out the strategies needed for safety of our hills, as well as to strengthen the resilience of these picturesque terrains. With these words, I would request Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division NIDM, to welcome the dignitaries and participants to his welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anilji. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. First of all, I thank all the dignitaries who are present in our inaugural program and accepted our humble invitation to be part of this program. So thank you all the dignitaries
PP
and the
Srivastava
delegates.
ji and others, they are all in attendance. उनको panel में लेके आओ.
Anil, please bring Shri PP Srivastava ji into panelists. He is amongst the attendees. So I welcome all the dignitaries and the delegates for this program and thank them for accepting our humble invitation to be part of this program. Particularly, I am very much thankful to Honorable Minister of Town and Country Planning, Urban Development and Parliamentary Affairs from Government of Himachal Pradesh, Shri Suresh Bhardwaj ji, who has kindly accepted our invitation to be part of this program, particularly focusing on hill area, safe hill area development and a focus on earthquakes, landslides and flash floods. So I am also thankful to and welcome Shri Ajit Seth ji, former Cabinet Secretary, who has actually dealt with lot many disasters and also seen many disasters in the hilly terrains of Uttarakhand and managed them during his tenure as Commissioner of Kumaon, and his long experience in handling and management of disasters at the national level. So I welcome him on my personal behalf and on behalf of NIDM. I welcome the other dignitaries. Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi ji is a well-known person who has been given both Padam Shri and Padam Bhushan, and his work in environmental conservation is very well known. He has worked very hard and is known for his contributions toward environmental conservation and development. We are very happy that he has been able to spare his precious time and join with us on this occasion. I welcome him in this inaugural program. On behalf of NIDM and my personal behalf, I welcome Shri PP Srivastava ji, who is former member of Northeastern Hill Council. His status was equivalent to a minister, and he has been doing good jobs during his tenure as member of NEC, and subsequently also he is a very well-known bureaucrat and has done a lot of works in earthquakes, landslides and flash floods, particularly in northeastern part of the country. So I welcome him on this program, and I welcome ED&IDM, who is actually the motivating force for organizing all these programs, and he has been encouraging and promoting us to conduct more and more such programs with more and more people and organizations. I welcome Himachal Pradesh State Disaster Management Authority, who has agreed to be our partner in organizing this program. Particularly Shri DC Rana ji, who is also part of the experts who will speak in this webinar. So I welcome Shri DC Rana ji as Special Secretary of in the HPSDMA and Government of Himachal Pradesh. I welcome all the delegates who have spared their valuable time and are participating in this program. I welcome each and everyone and thank them for being part of this program. With these words, I hand over to Mr. Anil Kathak. Anil.
Thank you very much, sir. Further, to enlighten the participant, I hand over the mic to Major General Manoj Kumar Jindal, Visit Seva Medal, Executive Director, NIDM, and request him for his keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Is he on mute?
Sir, again, I'll start off. I am very thankful to the government of Himachal Pradesh for collaborating with NIDM and holding this webinar on such an important topic, which is affecting Himachal Pradesh in a big way, the landslide, the floods, and the earthquakes. I particularly welcome Shri Suresh Bharadwaj ji, who is Honorable Minister for Urban Development, Town Country Planning, Housing Minister, Government of Himachal Pradesh, and Shri Ajit Seth ji, IAS, former Cabinet Secretary, who has always been guiding us in our programs. Shri PP Srivastav ji, who's member Advisory Board, NDMA, and who is doing a similar work on similar issues in Northeastern region in a very, very large way. And Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi ji, who's Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan awardee. It's an honor to have you with us, sir, on our program. And Shri DC Rana ji, Director cum Special Secretary of Revenue and Disaster Management of HPSDMA. So this is a very august gathering which has collected, and we already have more than 356 participants who are increasing by the minute. This itself shows that how much the community is affected by this issue and how much the community is wanting to resolve this issue. And the very presence of such dignitaries on such platforms shows the commitment of the state government to do something about it in the service of the community. This is a very important subject that we are talking about, because disaster management, public safety, sustainable development initiatives in the hilly terrains, they have capacity development for landslide risk reduction, floods, earthquakes as one of the essential components of planning, policy, and decision-making process at different levels in all sectors. So the recurring, widespread, and sudden nature of such hazards, which poses high degree of risk frequently in susceptible areas. However, it has been seen that the capacity of the affected communities is limited due to paucity of adequate attitude, resources, institutional mechanism in many places, operational procedures, regulatory measures, and enabling environments. So this is also linked with lack of sensitivity, information, awareness gaps, preparedness gaps among the vulnerable society against the potential impending risks. So there is a need that to ensure that the effectiveness of response to these disasters is also related to the coping capacities of the communities. And it is perceived that an aware, informed, and prepared community is better able to cope and respond to disaster situations than otherwise. So thus, there is a need to understand the levels of capacity within the society against disasters like we are discussing today, that is landslides, earthquakes, and floods, identify the gaps, assess the needs and means for developing or enhancing these capacities to ensure public safety, environmental conservation, and sustainable development for the future. Capacity is at the core of the development of disaster management. Capacity to manage disaster risks and emergencies requires knowledge, skills, resources, motivation, and a particular attitude and mindset at different levels along all the sectors. It will include training, education, guidelines, legislation, policy support for the actions, and systemic accountability. So whereas the capacity development focuses on understanding the obstacles that inhibit people or the government or the international organizations or the NGOs from realizing their goals, but while at the same time they are enhancing their abilities that will allow them to achieve measurable and sustainable results. So it takes place at three levels. Capacity development I'm talking about, the individual level, the organizational level, and the systemic or the societal level. And all these three levels are interlinked and interdependent. If investments in capacities are made at only at one of the three levels or one of the two of the three levels, neglecting the others, the result might not be lasting and might not be sustainable, as they might be confined to groups of individuals or organizations and may not be able to reach the intended purpose. It is important that in context of India, we have taken, government has taken actions to establish an institutional framework and mechanism for disaster management uh, after the tsunami, earthquake, and the Yokohama conference in 1994. And the Disaster Management Act 2005 was enacted. So that has laid down an institutional framework and laying down roles and responsibilities for each institution within that institutional framework. And it is utmost important that these frameworks should function and they should be empowered. They should be empowered to take decisions. They should be empowered to have a say in all the policy interventions, all the policy making, project implementation. NIDM on its own has been doing to create awareness and train the officials at various levels on these issues, but it is up to the states to take it forward. At local level, if I will say, the governmental and the non-governmental organizations, they have also introduced many activities, projects and programs which are related to landslides, flood, or earthquake management. Whereas the main stakeholders for risk reduction at local level are the academic bodies like the universities, IITs, National Institutes of Technologies, National Institute of Science and Education and research field organizations in the states like Department of Science and Technology, remote sensing, geology, mines, public works department, irrigation and flood control, forest, etc. They're all involved in this. NGOs, community-based organizations, public and corporate sector organizations like hydel sector, power sector, communication, transport. So they are all there. And the local level measures that include are mostly sensitization, awareness, and advocacy, education, training, and preparedness development. So these all need to go on concurrently along with various policies that the state government makes for their respective states, depending upon the perils that they face. And for that very purpose, this particular webinar is being conducted so that awareness level of various participation is brought home, and it is brought home to a single point of focus and direction so that everyone thinks on the same lines and everyone has a clear understanding of what is required to be done and what they can contribute to the disaster risk reduction in the state. So with that in mind, I once again welcome all the participants. 385 have joined so far for a good session, learning experience, and I'll request all the participants to raise as many questions and observations they want to through the chat box so that they can be addressed or taken note of. I once again welcome the Honorable Minister and all the esteemed panelists who have come together today for this webinar. Thank you so much, and over to you, Anil Katar.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, capacity is gold for disaster management, and there is a need to enhance the capacity of local communities to cope with the disasters that are frequently affecting our hilly states. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I would like to invite former Cabinet Secretary of the Government of India, who has 4 decades of administrative experience with him, Sri Ajit Kumar Sheikh, and request him to share his perception with us. Over to you, sir.
Oh, thank you, Anil. Major General Bindal, the other distinguished speakers who would be following me, and all the participants in today's event, Professor Surya Prakash, and of course, Shri Kathet. I thank the NIDM and General Bindal for organizing this webinar on this very important event. And I'm glad to learn that such a large number of persons have already shown interest and they've joined in. So, because this, without doubt, this is an extremely important area. Now, I wish to share a few thoughts with you. As was so kindly mentioned, I've had a little bit of experience of actually handling some disasters, an earthquake, a flood, the Uttarkashi earthquake, as was mentioned, and also dealing with disasters at the level of the National Crisis Management Committee, where anything from the crisis which took place in Kedarnath, or the Jhelum floods, or even the assistance we sent to Nepal, or the Sikkim earthquake, and even cyclones like Hudud and all. So there are a number of events which I had occasion to contribute, and also provided a good learning experience. Now, the hills, they are a natural biosphere reserve, rich in, fauna and plants, mineral wealth. But there are problems also. They suffer from land erosion and are vulnerable to seismic and weather phenomena. Now, one cannot belittle the work that has been done by different central and state agencies over the decades towards development of the hilly regions. But major earthquakes and floods, they also tend to bring into stark relief the gaps which still exist in our planning mechanism and the actual level of preparation and preparedness of the government machinery to cope with such emergency situations. Of course, besides the government machinery, there would be the non-governmental sector, the voluntary sector, and so many other sectors which get involved in any relief and rehabilitation work. Now, to develop these hilly regions, there have been the central government programs since the mid-60s, the Hill Area Development Program, and since 1972 in the case of the Western Ghats. And one thing to remember, and this is something which people tend to forget often, is that whatever goes wrong in the hills ecosystem will have an effect on the plains as well. Now, there are numerous examples of this, whether relating to Uttarakhand or Himachal hills or the northeast, or in the Brahmaputra river basin or the Siang river basin, whatever you call it. Now, you cannot study a problem piecemeal. You have to study it, the upstream and the downstream effects also. So in order to continually update our knowledge, to increase the number of persons who are interested in this subject and who can become experts in this subject, we need to bring in more universities and organizations within the area of disaster research, because we lack teachers in schools and colleges who can impose upon the students a certain, encourage them to study this area and take an interest in it. And there are, of course, the other usual problems of there not being enough doctors in PHCs, the problem of unemployment, or problem of migration, especially male migration from the hill regions. Can't blame them entirely, because it's a question of livelihood opportunities and of education. But this is something which people in the hills always ask, and rightly so, that local resources should be the basis for local employment. Now, this has a bearing also on management of post-disaster reconstruction and rehabilitation. Now, to develop disaster response capacity at the local levels, especially in inaccessible and remote areas, community-based disaster risk management can be an alternative. But we have to remember that apart from the natural exaggerators, the development activities such as construction of structures and infrastructure in vulnerable areas, or deforestation, or expansion of urban boundaries, and negligence of proper slope management, they only increase the risk of landslides. Now, to understand the hills, to understand the Himalayas, or to understand the Western Ghats or hills in the south, but particularly in the Himalayan hills, we need to understand not just glacier moraine, but the whole life of the local residents, which is entwined with the alpine ecosystem. Now, lax enforcement of local laws or encroachment or lack of will even among the locals can often be seen. So we need to keep in mind not only engineering guidelines and engineering related guidelines, but also respect local customary sensitivities. So we need to respect local wisdom, and otherwise we'll just be repeating mistakes of the past. Essentially, we not only need to listen to the local people, we need to listen to the hills. And certainly to those who have devoted a life working in the hills, people like Chandrika Prasad Bhattji and Dr. Anil Joshi. It is such a pleasure that Dr. Anil Joshi is here with us, and he will be speaking to us shortly. I have had the privilege to visit his Adun, and they have done amazing work there over the years, to conserve nature, to conserve the ecosystem. And इनकी जितनी तारीफ करी जाए कम है. So now what are the tasks ahead? You see, more research needs to be done on what kind of education is best to convey construction ideas to a traditional rural population in the hills. Research also needs to be done to tackle some of the unresolved technical problems related to trying to use cheap local building materials for seismic resistant construction. But accumulated experience has shown that it is not just technical improvements, it is the approach that has to be thought out. Maybe low-cost roofing material is required, but work should also be undertaken and is being taken up and should be publicized to increase the life of indigenous construction materials, particularly wood, to preserve it against deterioration. Work is also required to be done and publicized on whether attempts made so far to persuade people to go in for safer housing construction have been effective. In particular, it needs to be examined to what extent government actions have influenced poor families who are not able to derive any benefit from the government machinery. There is need, in fact, to study the long-term impact of reconstruction and rehabilitation programs that have been undertaken in similar disaster situations in the past. We should attempt to examine one disaster and try to draw conclusions which can be used in responding to another disaster in another location. Because we have to remember that, a failure to understand disasters which needs to be very clearly understood. Now, a lack of sophistication in dealing with the housing in a post-disaster environment is often seen. Now, you see, the problem is that housing, it is often seen as a product rather than a process. We tend to continue ignore issues of financing or land tenure and land use and the question of capital flow within a disaster-affected society. We just say that, okay, for safe development of the hills, we require this sort of house. Now, it may not work that way. And also the tendency to sometimes devise housing programs which exclude the disaster victims, this also can be counterproductive. I remember when the sudden mudslide took place in Leh, in Kashmir, I was then the cabinet secretariat, and we had requested some officers who were dealing with bamboo in the northeast. They rushed there and they tried, and they actually built houses made of bamboo just to try it out. The bamboo was absolutely not at all native to Leh, but they were quite pleased with the results. But then the local people had to be involved, whichever house whichever family for whom the house was being built, their concurrence was taken, only then it was tried out. Now, I would also like to mention here briefly the inadequacy of the current criteria used for program evaluation. There is not much of a culture in our administrative setup to critically and dispassionately review the effects of relief programs. And at best we tend to examine them in terms of our own need rather than the need of the victims. In short, what we require is a bottom-up approach now. Now, in conclusion, I'd say that in an environment in which earthquakes, landslides, and floods are not infrequent, there are some general observations, which I would wish to make to conclude my remarks. Number one, a balance has to be struck by the senior administrators and within government between a program approach and a policy approach to a disaster situation. Now, housing is such a crucial area that much work will always be required to be done, involving various organizations beyond the government also. Ask the NGOs, ask the voluntary organizations. New methods of construction of houses and roads and culverts and parapets are always required. Research will be needed always on what kind of education best aids the, it will best convey construction ideas to a traditional rural population in the hills. Continued research is needed to facilitate transfer from lab to land in the case of earthquake-resistant construction. I know whether it is the IIT Roorkee and so many other institutions have been working on this for decades, but then this is something which, the more there are, the better. We should also be aware of the inadequacy of the current criteria for program evaluation and post-disaster evaluations, especially if activity is taken under pressure of time following a natural disaster. And above all, I think we should not forget the notable failures, that we have seen. Failures to involve fully the local people in any rehabilitation work. Failures to develop local capabilities. Failure to examine the complete range of options. And most importantly, it is the failure to understand that disasters, they should be understood in the greater context of development and not as an incident by itself. And lastly, there is a need to study the long-term impact of reconstruction and rehabilitation programs that have been undertaken in disaster situations. With these words, I'd like to thank the NIDM for having organized this webinar on a very important subject. And I look forward to sharing views and to learning from which so many other speakers and other participants will have to offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your learning experience pertaining to various disasters, especially in hilly terrains. Indeed, hilly ecosystem helps in reducing the carbon footprint. Therefore, conservation of mountain ecosystem is utmost important in reducing the impact of climate change. And also, we need to incorporate the traditional knowledge while developing strategies for disaster risk reduction. Thank you very much, sir. We are fortunate and honored with the presence of Honorable Minister for Urban Development, Town and Country Planning, Housing, Government of Himachal Pradesh, Shri Suresh Bharadwaj as the chief guest in today's inaugural session. And I request him to deliver the inaugural address to guide and motivate us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Shri Ajit Seth ji, former Cabinet Secretary, Government of India. Shri Anil Joshi ji, Major General Manoj Kumar, Shri Surya Prakash ji, Anil Kathak ji. I am delighted to join the webinar today on sustainable and safe hill area development with focus on earthquakes, landslides and floods. The theme of this webinar being organized under the joint aegis of National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, and Himachal Pradesh State Disaster Management Authority is sustainable and safe development of mountainous areas with special emphasis on earthquakes, landslides, and floods. The rugged hilly terrains of country, due to their peculiar geodynamics and geometeorological characteristics, are prone to numerous disasters like landslides, flash floods, cloudbursts, outburst floods, and earthquakes. Further, the anthropogenic pressure attributed to urbanization on unstable natural as well as built slopes is fabricated new risks of these disasters in the hills. More than 58% of the land mass is vulnerable to moderate ranges in the world. The Himalayan region lie in high intensity of earthquake zone. Around 21 states and 4 union territories of the country are susceptible to a landslide hazards. Himalayan region and Western Ghats are among the highly landslides affected areas. The ecological conditions along with monsoon precipitation and other factors have fabricated over 1/8 of geographical areas of nation prone to floods and river episodes. The climate change and its adverse impacts on temperature and precipitation patterns are indisputable and will further lame the potential of disasters in hilly areas and will be constantly challenging our strategies of mitigation and management of those disasters. National Institute of Disaster Management has been mandated by subsections 8 and 9, section 42, chapter 7 of Disaster Management Act 2005 to develop training modules and educational materials, undertake training, research, documentation, and publication for capacity development and dissemination of knowledge and information related to disaster management, assist in formulation of policies, plans, strategies, and frameworks for disaster risk reduction and resilience, as well as promote awareness among different stakeholders of enhancing human capacity to avoid, prevent, mitigate, prepare, respond, and recover efficiently in a proactive, holistic, and integrated manner. NIDM is a premium institute and a statutory body under Disaster Management Act 2005 for training, research, documentation, awareness, and human resources and capacity development in the field of disaster mitigation and management. The institute places emphasis on multi-stakeholder, interdisciplinary, cross-sectoral approach for an efficient, proactive, continuum disaster risk management based on participatory, integrated, multi-risk management concepts. It aims towards a disaster-free and resilient India. We need to give more emphasis to disaster management for safe and sustainable development in hill areas. I hope that during this discussion today, various aspects will be highlighted and we will be able to better deal with natural calamities in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Your presence and your valuable duration make the event more memorable. Thank you very much, sir. Apart from unprecedented challenges, disaster also provide us opportunity to re-examine what we have done so far, what mistakes we have made, and what improvements should come next. So we need to learn from each and every disaster to strengthen our strategies to negotiate their adverse impacts on communities and our environment. Honorable PM also exhorted to ensure that the opportunity to learn from a disaster is not wasted in his 10-point agenda on DRR. At the outset, I would like to thank Honorable Minister for Urban Development, Town and Country Planning, Housing, Government of Himachal Pradesh, Shri Suresh Bhargavaji, for accepting our invitation despite of his busy schedule and gracing the webinar with his presence as chief guest and motivating and guiding us. Thank you very much, sir. I also express a deep sense of gratitude to our dignitaries, Shri Ajit Seth, IAS former Cabinet Secretary, Government of India, Major General Manoj Kumar Dindal, DC PSM, Executive Director, NIDM, and Professor Surya Prakash, Head GMR Division, NIDM. Their insightful deliberation set the ambience for today's webinar, and hopefully our distinguished experts will further elucidate it. Once again, I thank all the dignitaries of inaugural session. Now, we move ahead for today's technical session. There are some instruction. Number one, attendance will be automatically generated, and 60% attendance at Cisco WebEx is compulsory to be eligible for certificate. Interaction, discussion, question answer session will be after the presentations of all the speakers. I request participants for their active participation in the technical session through their questions which they can share via Q&A box. Now, today's first expert is Shri P.P. Srivastav, IAS retired. He is member of Advisory Committee of National Disaster Management Authority and former member North Eastern Council. Education, urban affairs, people's participation in governance and disaster mitigation and management remain areas of special interest for him. He gained knowledge and experience of handling natural disasters like earthquake, landslide, flood, cyclone with local resources and traditional wisdom and coping practice. Over to you, sir.
Anilji, just check his video is working or not.
But my video is working, but I cannot see myself.
Sir, your video is not working, sir.
I can see. So, am I audible?
Sir, you are audible, but your video is not visible.
Shall I go on or what?
Or Anilji, meanwhile you can check his video. You can invite another speaker so that he's visible also. Not only audible but visible also.
Okay, sir.
Then you can take the next speaker, and meanwhile kindly resolve the problem.
Okay, sir. Now I would like to hand over mic to Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi. He is environmentalist and founder Himalayan Environmental Studies Conservation Organization. His organization has been applying knowledge of the environmental science and simple technology to bring consistent development to the rural villages of Himalaya. ESCO has served more than 5 lakh village people in nearly 10,000 villages spread across 9 Himalayan mountain states. He is a recipient of Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan Award. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So मैं सबको प्रणाम कहता हूँ, नमस्कार कहता हूँ, and thank you very much for this invite. और अजीत सेठ जी को कई बार प्रणाम, उन्होंने क्योंकि मेरे मन की बातें उन्होंने ही कह दी. And in fact, which I always been saying that The new science came very late, and it is the community of global rural people were before the science that we are talking today. So this has to be very clearly understood, which Ajit ji also have repeatedly saying that we have failed to understand in fact the many things which is very community based and rural and came after the ages, the knowledge that they have earned. Why I'm saying so, you see, their disasters and problems like landslide, flash floods have all time been there, had all time been there. It is nothing new, but the disaster damage is more now because the reason simple being that so-called aggressive development that we have been able to do, we see that become the damage later on. So-called development become the vikas become the vinas, and that really to be we should must understand, and which I have been my understanding to various disaster we have been exposed to, because I believe that the sufferer can only give you the best solution. We should always understand the issue, and we have been sufferer, and we know what happened at that time when the 1992 disaster, 91, 2013 Kedar disaster, we had been the part of it, and we were the sufferer also. And within the community, we believe that the solution better can come from the community rather than we have been thinking that the other source can help us a lot. Now, why I say so, you really need to understand one very basic issue. What we have in the community in the Himalayas as a part of settlement that we had since ages, this age-old knowledge, wisdom became culture, and culture is always is intact with the conservation also. And this is a very important. Culture is conservation centric, and the new knowledge, science, and civilization take, make us more consumerism towards which takes to the more consumerism, but it is not that way sustainable. And what has happened in the recent past, the different disaster, because we all thought that the best way to lead a good life will be the what we can gather from the resources, new technology, nice science, roads, and whatever we can do as a counterpart have been enjoying in the flatlands. Also tried to do the same, but we have not been able to be very successfully so-called sustainable as we were 200 years ago. That's a very it's a truth that we really need to accept. And therefore, another reason is that current science is very independent of wisdom. What we have been doing, if we decide construction technology, we have not been seriously thinking the reason as itself, as Ajit ji also has pointed out, there are various issues which can only be, the science should not be independently thought out. It's a process for a given place. Really need to develop a construction technology we are developing. It cannot be thought out in the shooting in the Roorkee and other places. But it's very important. It has to be made participatory whenever we develop a technology, and in places like rural part of the country or Himalayas in particular, which is very vulnerable, we really need to develop a participatory mechanism when we do the so-called development. We in the Himalayas, the Himalayan people, we are very. I mean, the whole Himalaya is very vulnerable. Everybody knows, and we strongly believe that what we have not yet understood, we have been working on various sciences, but we do not know the science of nature even today. And had that been there, the part of so-called technology development processes, there would have been many things which we
I can see you
at
now.
the later stages feel that this is not good, that this has not happened good. So, I mean, it has to be inclusive in nature when we develop a technology or the processes we try to do. It has been very independent of and we believe that there are many issues, there are many technology developed, they are not very relevant in the rural context, because independently thought IITs and is, but you know, this country where 650,000 villages live, we really have to have a knowledge technology package which is very inclusive of local ecosystem plus participatory. It has to be very participatory. If we look into the different stakeholder even in the Himalayas, we see number one is a community, which is the most important stakeholder, the state government, because the state government, I would like to point out, we were given the statehood in the Himalayas for 2-3 major reasons. So we had been saying that the so-called development has not been economically, we are not well off as compared to the other states in the country. And also the more we demanded the state whose ecosystem of this very vulnerable and Himalaya needs very high attention as compared to other because of ecological reasons. But you know, whenever the statehood came, when after it was never the part of so-called aggressive development strategy, we never included statehood.
म्यूट हो गया
It is just very dependent, and that is the reason where we suffered a lot. And scientists, engineers pointed out also here that we have not been at what should happen in Himalaya, but we should not forget one very important fact. If there is no Himalaya, 35% people in the world, it depends on the population. I am saying to you, many countries are part of the Himalayas. You know, 35% total population, we feed water and food and many other things which are related to the Himalaya. Himalaya cannot merely be thought a place for 5 crore people only, but it's a development more than 100 crore people. So therefore, the importance of Himalaya is not only for Himalayan people, but it is to everyone in living in this country and the other countries also. Therefore, anything we consider for Himalaya in the development or whatever design we think, whether it is in agriculture, in any other sector, we really need to think ecology inclusive economic package. If you are doing a construction technology, let me tell you that I'm giving you an example why it has to be wisdom based. Why it has to be wisdom based? It has to be wisdom based mainly because, you know, wisdom, as I said, it is a culture, and culture includes the conservation. Whereas the new science knowledge, which is very independently developed at one place, does not have that element or conservation, and culture train us for conservation also while we do that. So I'm giving you an example of that. Example is that many part when the earthquake have been repeatedly coming also every 10 years and so that have been hitting us, some of the places where the buildings remain intact, and many places you must have done such studies, I know quite sure about it. The many places which newly built building collapsed. That's one thing. And even in some valley like Yamuna Valley I'm talking about, where the material, local material does not merely means it was available locally, but it does have a quality as compared to the material that we have been, energy intensive construction material that we have been building. They had a better quality and very good ecosystem in construction also, the local material add. And I know there is a scarcity of local material now. We used to have a good forest. Now you can't touch forest today. And also the material of construction that was available, and the population which is extensively have gone up and require this much of the thing. But even than that, if we really need to have that element, we keep in mind what is the role of science and technology is to develop a material also which can be very similar or close to what the quality of the local. So these are the kind of studies that we really need to do, and I believe that, I absolutely believe that, and many people, that ever since we have the statehood granted, many liberty was also given whenever you want to make building, you can do that. Not many issues are important given that. But earlier, as a part of the culture, whenever we used to build something for us as a home, as a house, we had three parameters importantly taken care of. What is the location where we have to build it? And while doing it, there was a group of people to decide where the construction should be done. And it was based on the local wisdom. बहुत हवाएं ना चलती हो, बहुत आपका material local available हो, उसके नीचे rock हो, ये सब. Today, you can build anywhere you want a house, close to the river bed, and it takes away whenever there is a flood comes. And so many other things had happened in the past. So what I'm trying to say out of this, that even it's a science technology we are serious about to be developed for the Himalayas. It has not to be done independently. It has to be now, in any case, a participatory. And because ultimately, who are the consumer? The consumer should also be involved. That means community. What we are trying to build for them, what we are trying to create for them, it has to be very participatory. Even the policy maker should begin their thought of making a policy very grassroots. I do not deny that doesn't happen, but the way it has to be more important. The reason is now because of a climate change issues, because of population rising, such disaster will keep on coming the way it is happening, and Himalayas are most vulnerable as compared to the other part of the country. Himalaya will be the more sufferer, and I always have been saying that the savior of the environment are the sufferer now. Most of the disaster have been hitting us. Climate change, we are the most vulnerable. We 7% forest cover that we have in the country, we were giving water, soil and everything, and we become more sufferer. If you look into the country's different disaster, we became the most victim, and those savior are the sufferer. This is a very important issue, and I think we really need to understand. And the last thing, which I believe, because we have been very close to many disaster, what we have found that my request will be one area that need to be very much focused. Well, many other things PG has said that after the disaster, the resource-based economy can help. HESCO as a group we had been doing, we did it whenever the disaster hit. Immediately after what is available, we generated their livelihood, value add the product and brought in the market, and what we did in that. But the most important, immediate after disaster are 24 hours. That is one area which is very crucial, because not in any case our observation are 24 hours nobody can help you empower any body that you have, but they become helpless. Nothing come in the help for 24 hours. We must be very focused on this 24 hours. Who is to do that? It is ultimately the community. I mean, their empowerment, their training, which already is there, which they have been facing disaster one way or other, which may be very mild or minute, but if we do that 24 hours, we will be saving life. We will be doing immediate loss of the life and the property. But that 24 hours, we always focus. And if we look into how best we can do that, let us decide which of the body in the village can do that. Gram Pradhan may be one, but primary school, which is available in every village in the country, in the Himalayas also, and they have a common by government also. If we make them, when you can use this primary school teacher for corona, we have been putting them for the corona patient, their number we gave, they have been calling, where are you, this and that. Why can't primary school teacher must be equipped? Because the reason is primary school teacher most of the times are local. They are worked with the local situation, ecosystem, and they speak local language. They can, and they are padhe likhe. And now you can see that who is a teacher in the primary school. They are at least MSc and above that. So if we can 24 hours, we take crucial hours. I think if we have a larger focus in first phase, where the 24 hour, which is very crucial, in every village, vulnerable villages, most of the cases. If we can help the community through a primary school or any other government structure and so on, and train them, equip them with the immediate relief and so on, I think that will be a very important initiative, because we as a social organization are seriously trying to find out the best way, because we are always live in a we all time been thinking that at the time when earlier 10-20 years ago we had always been welcoming the monsoon and the rains. Today we do not. The reason is that every village live in a very डरा हुआ सा है, रात को सोते नहीं है, तेज बारिश आ जाएगी, डर के मारे भागने की कोशिश करते हैं, इधर उधर चौकीदारी करते हैं. I think this will be very important if this 24 hours can be thought very well, and we can do that. I again thank you for this invite, and sure that I have learned from many speakers before me, and I'm quite sure if in any way I'll be useful, I'll definitely be the part of we really part of the and the hills.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your valuable experience and expertise that you have earned from. Thank you very much, sir. Now, as Shri P.P. Srivastava is retired, is back with us, I will request him to take his talk. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible and your video is also fine.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, permit me first of all to congratulate General Bindal, ED NIDM, Professor Surya Prakash, you, Anil Kathai, and all your colleagues, as well as my very good friend, Mr. Ajit Seth, and all other guests. See, NIDM is to be congratulated for taking this laudable initiative of making the best use of the prevailing corona restrictions by organizing a series of webinars like this with to tell us how we can all save our own and others' lives and assets in the event of natural disasters. This is a very highly relevant initiative for our people living in the highly vulnerable Himalayan region, and especially in our northeastern region, which has been identified as one of the 6 most earthquake-prone areas of the world. The other 5 being Mexico, Taiwan, California, Japan, and Turkey. This is from quotation from Honolulu workshop of May 1978. Now, coming to landslides, I will not go into the technical aspects of landslide because there is hardly time for it. But landslides triggered by earthquake, slope failures, heavy precipitation, or other causes are in fact real big killers of men and animals, destroyers of property, and disruptors of communication linkages. Dr. Surya Prakash, who is there, Professor Surya Prakash, he has been the pioneer in conducting landslide studies, and especially in the northeastern region, Himalayan region. Now he has his report has revealed a total of about 11,000 landslide sites in the country, bulk of them being in the western and eastern sectors of Northeast. This is an older figure when he had started this work in the mid 2000.
Sir, currently it is more than 50,000.
More than 50,000 now, correct.
Yes, sir.
Right. That was, I think that was the northeast part. Now, treatment of landslides so far has left much to be desired. Effective prevention and mitigation calls for a well-coordinated, multidisciplinary and multi-agency approach. Now, here is what I say. When a landslide occurs on a road, the first it is entrusted to the PWD, the first agency to come forward. And the very efficiency of the PWD is measured by how fast they can restore the communication. Therefore, they try the shortcut method of just restoring the communication at any cost. And therefore, it becomes, it is not, the landslide cause is not cured fully. And so it recurs year after year, and we keep on spending money year after year. Now, that is where we have gone slightly wrong. The multi-agency, multidisciplinary approach has been lacking. Now, but our main idea is to save lives and assets. That is our prime, objective. So what we did in the Northeast, because it very much prone to landslide, is to hold Indian Landslide Congress with the help of a Dr. Avasthi, who was a retired GSI officer who had served in the Northeast. We held first was held in Lucknow in 2010, second was held in Guwahati in 2011, and the third we held in Port Blair, Seacoast, in 2013. Now, in the Guwahati, the first thing which we said was, while the permanent solution of an earthquake, of a landslide, may take some time, let us at least save lives by evolving a proper early warning system. And here, Amrita University of Kochi, Mata Amritanandamayi's institution, that took the lead, and we went around Northeast and Uttarakhand also together to locate proper sites, and then we zeroed in on the Chandmari site near Gangtok in Sikkim, where a whole sort of a valley type of location was threatened by landslide. It was a good residential area, lots of people living. So we prepared a scheme, got it sanctioned, early warning system for Chandmari, right? Ministry of Earth Sciences, Dr. Shailesh Naik was their secretary at that time. He was kind enough to sanction the project, and it is now well in position. So early warning system has been perfected. In fact, in Western Ghat also, Amrita University has done this job, and lives of people are being saved. But now comes the assets also have to be saved. For that, pioneering work was done. Professor Surya Prakash is very well acquainted with it, involved in it, by Dr. R.K. Bhandari, one of our topmost internationally acclaimed experts on natural disasters. And he mobilized the Indian National Academy of Engineering, the top level engineering organization of the country, and held discussions which lasted for a long time, but concentrated discussions involving all the technical departments of the Government of India and institutions which are connected with landslides. So it was a real, genuine, multidisciplinary approach. And we finalized I was also fortunate to be a part of it. And we finalized it in November 2015. A complete paper was a strategy for dealing with landslide was given. And you will be interested that there was total unanimity in the assertion of top national level participants that, I quote, unlike earthquakes and tsunamis, landslides are predictable, preventable, and controllable. And that they went on to say, there is a need to strengthen, amplify, and accelerate the pace of scientific studies on occurrence, distribution, processes, frequency, and impact of landslides, and link these studies organically and intimately with this landslide management in the multi-hazard context. Now, this was submitted to NDMA. We have discussed it. I had personal discussion with General Lamba at that time, and they have also produced, NDMA has produced a revised manual on the landslides in 2019. See, what is now needed and urgently needed is authentication of this formula, which has been of permanent eradication of the landslide menace. What the experts have suggested on one particular nagging landslide. We went round and we have selected, sort of one of the slides selected that way was our main that Sikkim Chandmari landslide site, where a lot of studies have been done when we put into operation the early warning system by Amrita University. So all these things again, and now it is waiting for this multidisciplinary investigation to be done, and the danger, it should be the danger, risk of anything happening should be eliminated once for all. The experts have also said that in most of the cases, it is possible to, and again I quote a small portion, they say, today we have the knowledge and tools and experience to predict and avert landslides, most if not all landslides, by tapping the phenomenology, instrumentation, and integrated GPS and information communication system, we can monitor unstable areas in real time, even during unfavorable weather conditions. It is time, therefore, to launch a selected mission mode project to initially cover timely prediction of all possible reactivation of major old, dormant and seasonal landslides, and B, landslides and floods due to bursting of glacial lakes, flash floods due to bursting of landslide dams, and first-time landslides in urban and strategic areas. Hello? Sorry. Nationwide process may take a long time and lives will continue to be lost. Now, this is something which hurts us all. You see, lives are getting lost, and on the other hand, all the experts say that it is preventable and controllable. Then, if lives are lost, we must bear some responsibility for the loss of those lives. We must therefore, in double quick time, select one landslide, apply this recommended strategy, and cure it for once for all. Then it will become a recognized protocol for all other treatment of all other landslides and for eliminating the landslide menace. Otherwise, we see how many lives of pilgrims are getting lost in the Uttarakhand Himalayas because of landslide recurring. Okay, now we come to the other part. This is what the technical system, and I am now prepared, gearing myself to agitate on this point and see that one such experiment is taken up to utilize, to implement this strategy, expert strategy, to cure the Chandmari landslide and then utilize it. Now, next thing is, what should the community do in this? How to educate the community? Because unless the community becomes an active stakeholder in disaster mitigation, we can never we can never reach the last mile in disaster management. Always there will be casualties, and preventive measures have to be done. So in that case, we have to reach the community, and that part, I think it will take a long time. The community has to be, you see, a reason inspired from within, not from outside, not from the government order, but from within. And the best way is their own children. Now, fortunately, the children, I mean, with the universalization of primary education, children are of the primary schools at least, they cover all the communities. No sort of poor sections of community will be left out if these children are inspired. And that can be done because school safety program is going on, And after with that school tracy program, if we can ask the child after a a nice earthquake program, if we say that, look here, you are trained in the school, and so earthquake came, but you have saved your life. But when you go back home, what do you see? You see people fighting, people, your near and dear ones gone. Why not inspire them to be trained? And that will work. Then we start training. District DMAs should then work out, have that, and let their training be like a family picnic for the residents. And they will prepare safety drills and undergo safety drills, prepare safety manuals for their houses and for their location, etc. So that is what we want now to do. And I think I will have completed my time. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity of communicating. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your experience. In India, monsoons has become similar to landslides that includes precious lives besides devastating impact on environment, infrastructure, and structure. Moreover, the physiological blow by landslide is enormous and hilly can take a long period. Participatory approach is what we needed to save lives and our hill slopes from landslide. Thank you very much, sir. Now, I will speak DC Rana, IS. He is Director cum Special Secretary, Revenue Disaster Management, Government of Himachal Pradesh, and also serving as Member Secretary, Himachal Pradesh Council for Science, Technology, and Environment, as well as Director of Department of Environment, Science, and Technology, Government of Himachal Pradesh. Over to you, sir. Rana sir, are you there?
Hello, yes, I'm there.
Okay, sir.
Just give me a 2 minutes.
Sure, sir. Sure.
So I'll give a brief PowerPoint presentation, and let me thank NIDM Executive Director, Major General Manoj Kumar Bindalji, organizer of the division, Professor Surya Prakash, distinguished guest, and panelists. So the topic which has been given to me is earthquake resilient development in hills. So I'll start with that. Just a minute. Huh? Okay. As we all know, the different speakers have spoken about the vulnerability of Himalayas, though today the specific focus is on landslides, earthquakes, and floods. So we have a lot of hazards which affect Himalayas, and we are prone to almost all type of hazard except for those which are related to coastal areas and other places. Just a minute. So we all know the vulnerability of Himalayan region to earthquakes, and the entire Himalayan region is highly vulnerable to earthquakes. And if we see the position of Himalayas and the earthquake which have affected this region for over the years, the earthquakes have been marked along the Indian and Eurasian plates which have hit the Himalayas. And see, there's a lot of scientific evidence to suggest that a big earthquake is overdue. We keep getting these warnings through different sources, through the media, through scientific community, and this needs to be taken very seriously. But the issue which comes to the focus is, have we actually learned from the earthquakes? Have we learned and have we moved on, and have we prepared ourselves for earthquake disasters? So I'll just cite one example as how vulnerability has increased over the years. In 1819, Kutch region of Gujarat was hit by 8 magnitude earthquake, and there were around 2,000 deaths. The same region was again visited by another earthquake in 2001. The magnitude was 6.9, which was a lesser magnitude, but more than 6 times people died in that earthquake. So over the year, the vulnerability was built. And if we look at the example of our own state, Himachal, if we look at a Kangra earthquake, 8 magnitude earthquake struck on 4th April 1905, killing more than 20,000 people when the epicentral population was not more than 4 lakh, destroying more than 1 lakh houses, and a lot of more damage happened. And see what will happen in Himachal if Himachal is again hit by an earthquake. I'll cite 2 studies. One is that of Professor A.S. Arya, who calculated the repeat of Kangra earthquake based on 2011 census data, and this paper was published. And on the basis of his analysis, he said that if all the buildings were without earthquake-resistant feature, we could lose as many as 65,000 lives. And if all the building had earthquake-resistant feature, then the loss of life could be as low as 12,000. And he has given a very detailed analysis as what can go wrong in the current scenario. In the year 2012, NDMA, along with the states and scientific and technical institutions, worked out a scenario exercise for the Himalayan region, northwest Himalayan states. And it was presumed that a hypothetical earthquake was presumed in Kangra, in Sundarnagar area of Mandi districts of Himachal. And then it was estimated based on scientific data and analysis as what can happen in Himachal and the adjoining states. So I'll share the analysis of Himachal. So you can see the isoseismal map of Himachal. This epicentral area could be hit with intensity of 9 and 10 in the MSK scale. And if we look at the death figures, sorry, got. And as per the estimate, the projected scenario, it was assumed that it will be a nighttime earthquake. And given the population of Himachal, 68.56 lakh, we could have 2.3% casualties, that is 1.60 lakh. And projected injuries were around 16%, which is around 11 lakh, which is a very terrifying and huge number. So I like again to just to show as if we don't learn from earthquakes, so where could you stand? I'll give example of 2 earthquakes. One of Haiti, which was hit by an earthquake in 2010, and Chile was hit on 27th by another earthquake, 27th February 2010. And if we see the difference of 2 earthquakes and the origin time and the population and the intensity, the Chilean earthquake was far more stronger than the Haiti earthquake, but the casualty, the loss of lives and property was quite contrasting. Whereas more than 2 lakh people perished in Haiti, in Chile it was 525 and very few buildings collapsed. So it was that Chile learned from a very big earthquake which hit this country in 1960s, and it learned from it. It moved beyond that, and Chile developed its building codes and prepared for such kind of scenario. And Haiti was a situation like of ours, where a lot of lives got lost. Reasons for why we have built why we have built so much of vulnerability. So I'll cite some of the reasons. They may not be the list may not be complete in itself, but one of the reason in hill state is that we have resorted to unsafe construction practices, and this has resulted because over the years we had the learning from earthquake, but because of change of construction material, because of change of technique, the traditional knowledge which was available got lost, and we resorted to RCC constructions, which is an engineered construction, and we ended up building huge vulnerability, and we are continuously and day by it. And another common feature in hill area is the scant regard for land use planning. If we look at the case of Himachal, we still have many municipalities where the developmental plans are yet to be prepared, and the regulation is not based on scientific evidence. It is purely based on which area you want to preserve, which you want to open for construction. So another example is that disaster risk reduction is neglected area, not only in Himalayan region, but in the entire country as such. After 2005, after the enactment of Disaster Management Act, some fillip has taken, but still I'll say that disaster risk reduction is not a priority sector for governance. That's why a lot of vulnerability has been built. Another, if we talk about earthquakes, they don't happen on everyday basis. They happen once in decades and centuries. So human memory is not very, fresh, and we tend to forget the earthquake disaster as such and earthquake hazard as such, and we don't tend to prepare for it. Another example which we see very frequently in Himachal, people who violate building bylaws and codes and undertake construction throwing all the safety norms to the wind. So ultimately, the buildings get regularized, and so critical populism is responsible for that. So that is, I think, one of the reasons for building the vulnerability. Uh, uh, Increasing population is another factor which has contributed to large scale construction and development. And issues of capacity is something I think I feel that we in the country don't have adequate capacity, or if that capacity exists in the training and technical institutions, not many professors would like to come out of their institutions and contribute to the society. We are very limited of them, and everybody knows who they are, but there's a lot of pool available. Another capacity issue I'll talk about, like a mason who constructs house in the rural area, is he trained to construct earthquake resistant structure in the rural area? There are issues. There are issues with the capacity of the engineers and architect, where not, I think, many of them have been studying earthquake engineering as a subject. Another reason is that we consider that the disasters are acts of God, so nobody is responsible and answerable for the deaths and loss and destruction. And this is my favorite phrase, which I quote everywhere, that we as a society don't have a culture of safety. So that culture of safety needs to be built, and a lot of efforts are required to do that. It is not that we as a society, we as a country cannot move on and learn from past disasters. We have a very glaring example of two cyclones which hit Odisha, 1999 and 2013. Everybody who is dealing with disasters is well aware of what I want to say. It is only the willpower, because after 1999 super cyclone, a lot of effort went into mitigating the super cyclone, the cyclone disaster. Early warning was upgraded, shelters were constructed. So a lot of effort went, and then we saw the difference in 2000 Falin, and of course the recent cyclone which hit in other parts of the country. The cause of concern for Himalayan region is that for the last 200 years, in the last 200 years from 1803 onwards, many major earthquakes shook us, and prominent of them I have enlisted in the presentation. Kumaon was 8+ in 1803, Kathmandu 1833. 7.7 magnitude, and 8.1 magnitude Shillong earthquake in 1897, and 8 magnitude Kangra earthquake in 1905, 8.2 Bihar Nepal earthquake 1934, and Arunachal 8.5 in 1950. But if you look at the last 70 years, not a major earthquake has struck Himalayas, and everybody says that it is overdue, and how well we are prepared for it, that is something we need to ask ourselves. This is a slide from Roger and Willem study which he published in 2005, and based on the stress which has got accumulated in Himalayas, he projected as what could be the possible magnitude of earthquake which, if it strikes in different parts of Himalayas. I heard Dr. Bilam speaking through video conference to us in one of the seminar which was organized by IIT Mandi last year. So he has revised these figures. I don't have the latest version of this, but of course the hazard is huge, and I don't think we are well prepared for it. And if we look at the data of disasters, as we will clearly know that earthquake is the biggest killer. It is the biggest killer, and if we look at the enormity and the destruction caused by earthquake, I think a special kind of preparedness is required. This is the type of construction in hills. This is the example from Himachal. But if you look at other hill states also, if you look at northeastern, if you look at adjoining Uttarakhand also, so we have built a lot of vulnerabilities. We have structures which collapse even in small landslide, in small rainfalls. So if we are talking about earthquake, so there will be huge destruction. So showing some of the pictures from Himachal. So earthquake, we say, is the mother of all disaster. If earthquake will happen, there will be river blockade, there will be flash floods, there will be landslides, and this is how we have built our structure, our critical structure on the river beds and in the hazard-prone areas. Another picture from Himachal. So this is if what happens during rainfall, small landslide destroys buildings, but in case of earthquake, there will be thousands of landslide, and which will destroy structures and kill people. And another point which I would like to highlight is that our critical infrastructure is not resilient, and I can see it with my experience from Himachal or the hill state which I've seen. One example from Gujarat is there. This is the district hospital of Bhuj, which not only killed the patient, but doctors and the paramedics, attendants, and destroyed the infrastructure which was available inside. Another example of the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure.
Sir, with time constraint, I will request you to kindly conclude your presentation.
Oh, so I have to rush. So this is from Bhuj and Sikkim. Example of structures which are resistant to hazard. This is example from Nepal, our neighboring state, and this is the picture from 2011 Tribhuvan teaching hospital, which not only withstood the earthquake but also catered for the people who needed relief. Critical infrastructure I am focusing. These are the picture from Japan. The rest of the structures are gone, but this is the school building which survived. These are the other pictures from Japan, which are the pictures of schools, resilient infrastructure, which we need to focus upon. Another pictures from Japan. And what I'm trying to say that these buildings inspire confidence, But if you look at our structure, this is example from Dharamshala, which was the epicenter of 1905 earthquake. So this is the landslide which destroys houses in normal monsoon, and what will happen during the earthquake. So I'll just skip these pictures and focus on what I just want to say. Another example, instead of doing the post-mortem, there's a need to focus on preparedness and prevention. Slide from Gujarat, where a lot of cases were filed against the contractors and others. So instead of wasting time there, there's need for repairing. So what is the cause of concern? So cause of concern is that the construction has happened in the hazard-prone area, which is not based on building codes. Some example from Bhuj area, don't want to quote and don't want to talk about them. But we have been promoting soft stories in hill area, which is, I think we have seen what happened to soft stories in Gujarat. Development has been happening in unsafe location, and mitigation measures are required to be undertaken. Quality of construction is something of a very serious concern in hill areas, and development control regulations are either non-existent or they are of very poor quality. And the most important issue is the weak institutional structure where we need to focus. What is the problem? Why we are unable to reduce risk? Is it an issue of knowledge? Is it an issue of resource? Is it an issue of appropriate skills, or it is something else? Or do we don't have the right kind of attitude? So since the time is limited, I won't be able to explain them. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And this is a very important slide. What I attended one of the webinar which NIDM organized few days back. Somebody said that we should not have a department of disaster management. So when you create a department of disaster management, so this is the problem. So the other departments, the PWD and others will think that the disaster management is their job. So then how would DRR happen if this is the attitude? So we have to, bring in DRR in all development plannings and programs. So I'll skip this. So when we talk about hill states, the critical issues are construction. So construction, existing and new. Existing has to be retrofit, new has to be hazard resistant. Communication will be a critical feature, critical issue for hill areas. So multiple layer has to be built in. Early warning has to be, early warning system has to be strengthened. Another C is critical infrastructure. So we have to focus on hazard resistant construction. Connectivity, road network will get affected. So how do you make it less vulnerable? How do you build in air connectivity in the hill states? Building bylaws, building codes needs to be enforced. Land use planning is something very important. Training and capacity building of all stakeholders is important. I'll skip this. I'll just share. These are some of the what we are trying in Himachal. So we examined the current construction practices, devise simple IC material for the house owners. Building codes were translated into simple chakri for the masons as how he should undertake construction in zone 4 and 5. These are the schemes which I just wanted to share. We have launched in last 2 years. We have launched a scheme for hospital safety whereby training, capacity building, and retrofitting of hospital will be done. A scheme for masons training has been launched. A training for audit of lifeline building has been done, and then we'll be retrofitting them. A complete program on school safety has been launched. We are building a task force of youth volunteers, 10 to 15 for each panchayat, and we are also engaging interns for disaster management. So the crux of what I'm trying to say that we need to build a culture of safety. Only then I think we'll be able to reduce the hazards that are posing and that are threatening to the hill states. Thank you so much for giving me time and listening patiently to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for providing insight on earthquake vulnerability of Himalaya and critical issues for resilient development. Indeed, we need to come up with robust solutions to enhance the resilience of our built environment. PM 10-point agenda on DRR also highlighted the need to mainstream DRR in development activities, as well as a target 4 of Sendai framework also exhorted to substantially reduce disaster damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of basic services. Thank you very much, sir. Now, today's last speaker is Professor Surya Prakash. He is currently head of Geometeorological Risk Management Division. Faculty in charge of three specialized Center for Hill Area Development, Center for Early Warning and Communication, and Center for Coastal Disaster Risk Reduction, as well as his coordinating faculty for 8 central ministries: mines, communications, northern eastern states, petroleum, natural gas, shipping, labor, employment, new and renewable energy, and parliamentary affairs. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil. Can you give me power sharing?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Content sharing?
Yes, sir. Now you can share your PPT.
Okay, friends, my previous speakers, they have spoken about the earthquake. I think yes. Is it visible now, Anilji?
Yes, sir. Your PPTs are visible, but it is not in slideshow.
I'm doing it in slideshow now. Is it okay now?
Yes, yes, sir. It's okay.
Okay, let me start with my perspective. As head of Geometeorological Risk Management Division, we are dealing with both geohazards and hydrometeorological hazards, which includes earthquake, landslides, and floods, all the three which are affecting the hill areas. We have worked in almost all the hill states in the country, not only within the country, but even across the countries. And we learned the kind of development which is taking place both horizontally and vertically, as informed by Mr. Rana also, is very intense and unplanned, chaotic in nature. There is no space for disaster risk reduction and resilience in these areas. This is a picture which I took long back in 2006 when I conducted one program with HIPAA, and this was the situation in Shimla. Similarly, in the northeastern part of the country in Govt, we have high-rise buildings. So whether it is traditional structures or the new designs in terms of RCC buildings or high-rise buildings, we have very intense development both in the northwest as well as northeastern part of the country. Now I'm taking you towards Uttarakhand. This is one of the hill areas. Hills are very good considered in terms of environmental contributions because of the dense forest areas. Now this densely forested hill, once with the landslides and earthquake happened. Uttarakhand is famous for 1991 earthquake on 20th October and landslide in 2003. You can see almost more than 400 buildings at the foothill got affected. Not only the buildings of the private and the government colonies, but also the district magistrates headquarters itself got affected. At the national level, we have looked at it from a national perspective and developed guidelines, both on earthquake and landslides, as well as in the floods, and which can be considered for risk reduction. And look, accordingly, the risk distribution has also been envisaged, and almost all states, not only the Himalayan states, but also the states lying on the eastern and the western Ghats, as well as in the middle parts of our country, has suffered to different degrees from the landslides. And these landslides are not only affecting spatially, but also temporally, the behavior is different. So we must learn that how many landslides in what period of the year or the season they are affecting and how they are resulting into adverse consequences. It's no direct relationship between the number of the events and the number of casualties and the economic damages. So those studies are very much needed from all the states. I'm just showing you the historical database right from the British period when we started monitoring landslide way back in 1893. This is one of the landslides which happened in 1867 and 1880, which killed almost 151 people, and including 43 Britishers. Another turning point on the landslide management was Malpa landslide, which took place on 18th August 1998. More than 200 people got killed who were who returned from the Kailash Mansarovar route, including the famous dancer Pratima Bedi. And this issue was taken to the parliament, and at that time 3 task forces were made, and at national guidelines were proposed. And another landslide which took place in the same year in Ukkimatta, 107 casualties. So number of such lands, and a landslide close almost about 2 kilometers on the other side. So I can cite to several such examples. In 2001, 27 landslides en route to Gorikund near Fata. This landslide took place and killed more than 27 people. Similarly, large Hekla in recent times, I come back in 2009 in one of the villages in Manchari Tehsil of Uttarakhand, where almost 23 people got killed. The tragedy is that people are buried alive, and within very short period, they lose their lives. So the golden hours in safety of lives during landslides are very minimal, almost 3 to 4 hours, compared to others where we call almost 72 hours are the golden hours when maximum number of lives can be saved. And this is one of those situations, and people, their body parts get away. So these are the kind of situations we come across in landslide. I'm not showing you any other landslides than the ones which I have done, only few of them that I have dealt with, and you can see that what are the situations in those landslides where we worked together. And this is Sungar and school landslide. So where 18 children between the age of 4 to 10 years they got killed, and this was the site. So situations are very perturbing. Our future generation are being lost, who are going to the schools, and even the hospitals, they got affected. So Varnavas landslide is one of the infamous landslides which happened in September 2005. One of the hotels which I also personally used to live and go there. Actually, this is the situation just a day before the landslide, and you see day after. You cannot imagine that those 4-5-storied hotels, their existence, and can you imagine the condition of the people who would have been there? But these were evacuated. We were keeping a watch on it, and we could do it. And mostly in the hill areas, we're depending on bulldozers and laborers to clear the road and the traffic and make the transport continue. But this is the place where even the bulldozer along with the laborers got killed. And I'm citing the historical cases in 1993, just upstream of Uttarkashi area. Our army, border strategic issues are very much important, and they are hindered by these landslides. So not only social, economical, and environmental issues, but also the strategic issues. We need to deal with it very clearly and very seriously. And also, sometimes we park our vehicles close to the landslide. This is one of the buses which was struck by a rolling stone, which was parked close to a landslide. And we are watching, and it happened in front of us. You can imagine what would have been the condition of the passengers inside this bus. And somehow a lady saw the stone rolling down. She cried, and there were 13 passengers inside which came down immediately. So these are the kind, and responders, we can take a lot of time, and getting coordinates of the location becomes very difficult. This is one of the area I am showing you in Bastari in Pithoragarh district, where the people actually landslide happened, and they saved those people, and they were just celebrating. It was 4:30 a.m. on 1st of July 2016. And another episode of the debris flow and landslides came and killed those rescuers also. So almost around 19 people were killed in that incident. So now we come to the flash floods. Uttarakhand, June 2013. I've been part of that, and we were witnesses to this. Anything, Anil? Somebody, so these are instances. You can imagine that we have been part of this, and we were responding to these events and trying to manage this situation. One of the training centers of SSB in Srinagar, how it got affected. So not only the 2013, actually, as Mr. Rana said, we are not actually learning the lessons learned from the past event or even the recent event. Previous years, in August 2012 also, it was the similar situation. Now I'm showing the photograph of 2012 August, where the buildings close to the river areas, they fell into the river because of the flash flood in Asiganga River, in Bhagirathi River Valley. So if we had learnt lessons from this these instances, then the 2013 we could have reduced the number of the casualty or the losses. And this was very much shown in the TV and media also. Falling of that is one of the hotels into the river, which was actually there through animation. And the situation was that it was completely filled in with wooden logs and river sediment that came along with the flash flood water. So these are the situations. And how do we manage? We do have good guidelines. As PP Srivastava said, that although geohazards, particularly landslides, are considered to be quite predictable and preventable, and 90% of the cost-benefit ratios have been achieved in other countries. But in India, we are still lagging behind because of our approach on this issue. So we can avoid them, we can identify the signs, we can know the potential disasters, and they are preventable. This particular landslide in Meghalaya, that actually caused crores of rupees loss. Later on, a tunnel was built which diverted the disaster incident and actually continued the traffic. So these kind of investments are very much and need to be promoted and encouraged. Similar situations in terms of rock sheds, and but we do try to have graded drains, but then we put them lot of plastic. So climate change and development and our practices, living practices in terms of use of waste materials, plastics also affects the occurrences of landslide. I remember there was a major landslide in Goa, which was because of garbage dump, and it cut off the state for almost a month from the neighboring states. So they are putting signboards, awakening and creating awareness and how to construct building in landslide prone areas. But people had to become more sensitized and conscious about it. The construction structural measures are available. Various kind of structural measures with respect to the kind of problems have been reported. It includes retaining wall, reinforcement structures, diversion structures, dispersion structures, drainage structures, both subsurface and surface drainages. So I will show you all those. Because of shortage of time, I will quickly show you the instances and the practices taken not only from the India but globally. We had a collaboration with Japanese, and they are considered as one of the best in these areas. And I could see that they had this kind of the crib systems on the slope surfaces, which is shortcreting with the reinforcement, not completely covering the wall, but with geogrid kind of systems. So this needs to be practiced, not as practiced in our country. Surface and subsurface drains more to be constructed. These are the best measures to be taken up than the retaining wall and reinforcement structures. The drainage, if adequately provided during development times, can mitigate the landslide hazards and their risk. However, we need to maintain them also. We are very good in development and investments, but we are not very good in maintenance, monitoring, and management. So these kind of situations actually reduce our capacities for the water discharge through these drainage systems to be cleared before the monsoons, so that they are not affected, and having new kind of drainage systems being replicated from other places, and also drainage wells. This is what I saw in Japan. In all, they know that the land is limited and they cannot displace the population, resettle in other areas. So they are trying to stabilize the landslide prone areas themselves through all various kind of means, whether it is drainage wells, drainage galleries, or any other systems. And you can see the drainage galleries also, the flexible drainage systems, collecting water from those landslide prone areas and disposing it to the safer locations. So these are all well monitored from each pipe being drained into subsurface areas or subsurface slopes. So the very good construction practices can be seen globally, and we can learn from them as well. So you can see water also comes out. So appropriate location of our drainages is subsurface drainage is very also important, not only surface drainage. So all this must be taken care, and other measures in terms of gradation of the slope, dentition, scraping, and other things can also be done to control landslides its magnitude, severity, and the impacts. So these are some of those things and pictures I am showing you, which has been practiced in our country and elsewhere. Zigzag arrangements of the stones, cut stones allowing the automatic drainage conditions within the back slopes, and use of geosynthetics and geotextiles and crib structures using either steel, concrete, or wood materials. So the timber materials, all these are possible, and using crossbars to avoid toe-induced landslides because of river erosion or stream erosion. So all this being done in India. This is from example from Arunachal Pradesh and near Itanagar. Karsingsa landslide. Use of vegetation bioengineering measures is also need to be promoted, which will be more natural and aesthetics in nature.
Sir, we are not able to hear you. Surya, sir?
Connecting on mobile because the electricity had gone out. So I was disconnected on my computer.
Okay, sir.
So I'll connect on my this mobile and just conclude this presentation.
Okay, sir.
Am I audible, Anilji?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, because time is passing by, let me conclude that we have the means. We can recognize these hazards in the hills, whether it is flash floods or landslides, and we should try to bring in our practices, regulatory measures. That's why we requested an Honorable Minister for Town and Country Planning, where more urbanization and development is taking place. We must regulate so that this development is safe and sustainable in the hill areas. With these words, I thank the other speakers who had given a background of environment development and disaster management, including climate change. So thank you very much, and I hope we will be able to sustain. Nature gives us an awakening call, and the Shire has said कि जगाना आता है उसे कई तरीकों से, जगाना आता है उसे कई तरीकों से, दरों पर दस्तक देने खुदा नहीं आता, पड़े रहो सहमे हुए यूं ही, पड़े रहो सहमे हुए यूं ही, अगर हवाओं के बांधना नहीं आता. So let's learn to tame disaster rather than being tamed by them. With these words, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your field experience and practical mitigation strategies apropos of major disaster across the hilly states of India. Thank you very much. Due to time constraints, we will take only few questions. Number one question is to Ajit sir. Ajit sir, a question for you is, what are the preventive implications, steps to residents living in hill areas to safeguard themselves from the impact of earthquake and disasters?
Well, I think some of these measures have already been outlined by some of the other speakers, particularly Dr. Surya Prakash, for instance. and Mr. Rana. So basically, if you are living in the hill areas, the first thing you have to do is, I mean, it depends on whether you are talking about prevention wherever you are living, you happen to be living for years, or you want to locate some new place. If you want to locate some new place where to settle down, then of course those points which have to be taken care of have already been outlined by Dr. Surya Prakash, that you and Mr. Rana. So you look out. Naturally, you keep your eyes and ears open and you see what sort of locality it is, whether there is a slope, whether there is even the extremely low property prices is a good indication that the locals know that there's something wrong here. And see whether the construction is up to the mark, and whether any embankments or retaining walls, etc., have been made, whether there's adequate drainage, etc. There are a number of points. If you want to strengthen your dwelling or building or office and workplace, then there are two things. Number one, you can do retrofitting of strengthen the walls or the corners so that they can withstand damage. And also you have to be careful when constructing anything to see what sort of material you're using for the roof. For instance, in Uttarkashi, when the earthquake took place in 1991, a lot of cement was somehow available because the Teri Dam was being built, and the place was awash with cement. A lot of cement coming. Maybe some of it was finding its way into the market also. But anyway, everyone was very happy using cement for their, and so they had houses with walls built of irregular stones just piled on one over the other, no proper cementing even, but the roofs were slabs of cement. Now, this was an invitation to disaster because when the earthquake came, the unstable walls came crumbling down, and the whole flat, solid roof fell down and crushed them. So, and like Dr. Anil Joshi had mentioned, that you have to, bank on the wisdom of the past with these proven technologies, even though they are so-called old. So there are, even in ancient times, the houses, you see the old temples, they never collapse, whereas the new houses collapse. So they didn't have any modern materials, but the construction techniques were such that the corners were able to withstand and they held. So use those techniques. Technology doesn't mean something necessarily, it means something new, but use that technology, use those things, and always respect nature. Keep safety walls in whatever you do. But it's too short a time to really spell out in detail.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next question is for Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi, sir. And question is, what strategies should we adopt for melting Himalayas as the lower region get more under feet to get submerged?
Pardon, could not hear. I could hear. Listen, you. What is that question? Please repeat. What is the strategy?
What the strategies for melting Himalayas as the lower region get under more threat of submerged?
Melting Himalayas.
Melting Himalayas.
Himalayas, the whole globe.
I think it is.
We are the third pole also.
Melting glaciers increasing.
Which melting you're talking? Glacier melting?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Maybe he's talking about glacier melting.
You see, the climate change is an issue. But I would say the principle of nature says the consumer must be a contributor. Now, who consume more? If you look into the Himalayan people, do not consume what the nature had been given them. The water consumed more, not by them. The air, forests, and everything. Consumer are more in the urbans, and they add to the climate change. Contribute to the carbon dioxide. That is ultimately going to be the factor for the climate change. So what I'm trying to say is that this is a global issue now, phenomenon, and vulnerability, unfortunately, we cannot, sitting on the Himalayas, can control urbanization the way it is going at and so much energy consuming. So it is one issue which is have to be discussed and debated. And really, what is, as I said, nature principle says consumer must be contributor. We really make others also responsible toward Himalayas, then only the Himalayas will back. What is happening in Antarctica? 3 trillion glaciers have also already melted. This story has come. Now, who should be fixed responsible for that? Rural or not? It is the contribution that should come from the rest of the country or those who are consuming more and more energy? I believe so.
Thank you very much, sir. And
Unfortunately, in the consumer society, the slogan has gained currency that obviously promoted by those who manufacture, that the consumer is king. The consumer is not the king. He's the last man in the chain. He's at best a humble recipient. So he should stay within his limits.
thank you, sir. Next question is for Shri P.P. Srivastava, sir. And question is, we all understand the need of local community participation in disaster mitigation and resilience. Then why is still a proper framework to enable the flow of institutional research to local community and collaboration between the two bodies is yet to happen? Srivastava, sir, are you there? Srivastava, sir?
Sorry.
He's there, I think.
Srivastava, sir?
You can ask the next question meanwhile.
Next question is for DC Rana, sir. Sir, you have said that we have a pool of technical experts who can contribute towards disaster management, but they are passive. So, what steps government is taking to really motivate them and encourage them to participate and contribute more towards disaster management?
See, what I said, that the expertise, a lot of expertise lies in technical and R&D institutions and educational institutions. Now, the core mandate of those people is, of course, teaching and research. But what I feel, and in the mandate of IITs, I think it is there that they collaborate with the governments also. So NIDM under the PM's 10-point program is already coming up with the network of R&D institutions. So when we have a network of R&D institution, I think that may give a fillip to the people who have expertise and sitting in the these institutions to come out and work with the governments, actually work on the street, on the site. So it's a difficult thing, but there are volunteers who work, but not many, as I said.
Okay, thank you, sir. And this question is for Professor Surya Prakash. In Kerala, we are suffering recurring landslides every year, which causes human casualties. What are the remedies you can suggest by considering the Kerala's geographical conditions?
Your question is complete?
Yes, sir.
Anil?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Should I repeat?
Landslides are one of those hazards which even our society is well informed and experienced. They also know when does it occur, where does it occur. They can also recognize. The issue is that in order of them to meet their own needs more than what is actually available, they cause damage to themselves. Mahatma, it is for our need, but not for our greed. So what we are doing, we are going for deforestation. We are going for undercutting. We are also building close to the river areas. Earlier in old times, there used to be an informal decision that we have to build at least 300 feet away from the river area. So those precautions we used to take in old times and avoiding those disaster situations, whether landslides or any other, now we are forgetting. That's why our indigenous knowledge and traditional wisdom is very, very important. So nowadays, what we are facing in Kerala, or for example, for any other state in similar situation, is because of our own actions. So we have to keep a control on our actions in making modifications of the slopes so that they don't become unstable and fail. So we are inducing instabilities by introducing water. I give you one example. Ranaji is there. He was in Dharamshala also earlier in Himachal Pradesh. And in Dharamshala, we made a case study on landslides. While we were doing it, at that time, one of the MP, I think her name was Chandresh Kumari ji, her house had suffered because of a landslide. She tried her best with the local line departments and experts, could not manage. And then I was at a scientist at Wadi Institute. She called us. We studied that area. And while we studied, Dharamshala is one of the area which has very high precipitation after the Meghalaya area where we have the maximum rainfall, the Dharamshala, which is second high intensity rainfall area. So people are blaming nature and rainfall for the landslides. When we made a comparative study, we found out more water was infiltrating into the slopes and destabilizing those slopes, which were they trying to stabilize or manage, than the natural rainfall. The ratio was almost 15 times than the natural rainfall, which was infiltrating into those slopes and destabilizing them. So we told them, madam, that ma'am, it is because of you that landslide is continuing and persisting, not because of nature. So we have to manage our water optimally, disposing them in the runoff and infiltration conditions. So water is the main culprit for frequent and widespread landslides. Other is the river-based toe erosion. If you take away the toe, the slopes will run like a sportsman run. So we must realize those situations. That's why education and culture are very, very important. We have to make people aware, informed and prepared in these situations. And until this message goes, we will not succeed. So this is my reply to your question.
Thank you very much, sir. Srivastava sir, are you here? Hello, Srivastava sir.
I think I shall leave and conclude, get the session concluded.
So,
Anilji, please
okay,
concluding session.
Okay, sir. That's all for the question and answer session. Now, I request Major General Manoj Kumar Dinkar, PSM Executive Director and NIDM, for his concluding remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anil, and all the presenters. It was a wonderful webinar where a lot of issues came out, which started from governance issues to practitioners issues to the role of the community to the role of various departments should not be denuded, like was brought out by Mr. D.C. Rana, that since the disaster management division has been named, others cannot say that now it's no more our baby. So the interdisciplinary nature, multi-stakeholder engagement, and the resolve to do something about it has been endorsed in today's webinar. The issue brought about by Professor Surya Prakash about maintenance and the life cycle concept of any project is very, very relevant, because more often than not, we have found good projects going bad because their life cycle has not been catered for during the project implementation stage itself. And hence, it is very important that anything which is started, at least 10 to 15 years of cycle should be involved in that, so that it is studied, corrections made, mid-course corrections to other projects are made, and seeing the results of that. So it should have a research-oriented component also in that, wherein a team is specifically tasked to look at those issues for a number of years to come, and not only the present day format of having a committee or a team to look after the completion of the project and thereafter their role finishes. So there are many good points which have come, and I'm really thankful to the panelists who have given such valuable inputs. And just one second. And I am again thankful to Sri Ajit Seth, IAS, former Cabinet Secretary, Government of India, for coming on this webinar and showing the resolve the government has had over the years and is still having today. All the dignitaries, Shri P.P. Srivastava ji, who is a legend by himself from northeastern states on landslide earthquake related issues. Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi ji, who raised so many questions and he was so passionate about it. And Shri D.C. Rana ji, who brought about such practical aspects. And of course, Professor Surya Prakash, it's always a pleasure to listen to him. And a special thanks to Shri Suresh Bhardwaj ji, who is Honorable Minister in Government of Himachal Pradesh, that he spared his time and came on this webinar to address us and to show to the participants and everyone the commitment and the importance that Government of Himachal Pradesh places on disaster management related issues, disaster risk reduction related issues. Thank you, sir, for that. And here I would like to congratulate Mr. Anil Katat, who was the coordinator and the moderator for a successful webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your concluding remarks. And I hope every participant will have some takeaways from today's webinar that they will be discussing among their respective departments, groups, and will further invest in strengthening the resilience of our hilly areas. I once again thanks Honorable Minister for Urban Development, Town and Country Planning, Housing, Government of Himachal Pradesh, Shri Suresh Bhardwaj ji for his motivation and guidance. I take this opportunity to thank our distinguished dignitaries, Shri Ajit Seth, IS, former Cabinet Secretary, Government of India, Major General Manoj Kumar Vindra, VSM Executive Director, NIDM, for their guidance and valuable inputs in the webinar. I also take this opportunity to thank our distinguished experts, Shri P.P. Srivastava, IS, Member Advisory Board, NDMA, Shri Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi, Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan awardee and founder of ISCO, Shri D.C. Rana, IS, Director cum Special Secretary to Government of Himachal Pradesh, and Professor Surya Prakash at TMR Division and NIDM for providing us opportunity to learn and gain from their experiences and wisdom. I express a deep sense of gratitude to all participants without whom this webinar wouldn't be possible. In the end, I will like to thank my colleagues, Dr. Harjeet Kaur, Mr. Raju Thapa, our IT team of NIDM, Mr. Balaji, Mr. Shobhit Sharma, Mr. Gaurav Sinha for their support in organizing the webinar. With these words, I conclude my vote of thanks. NIDM will be organizing webinar on point 10 of PM's 10-point agenda on DRR, that is about greater cohesion in international response to disaster, on next Tuesday, September 29. Details will be shortly shared with you all. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar.
Thank you, Pranam. Thank you. आप सबको प्रणाम.
Thank you,
सबको
sir.
प्रणाम.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.